Alright, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, on this channel, I do my best to call out poor journalism when I see it, okay? Whether that be bias, whether it be people not taking the fighters' well-being into consideration, be that monetarily, be that emotionally, be that physically, or any of those things. I've done multiple videos on the likes of Ariel Helwani. I've done a video on Brett Okamoto. I've done a video on MMA Junkie and Bloody Elbow, and a lot of publications, a lot of different journalists. I have yet to officially do a video on the guy that I want to talk about today, which is Oscar Willis from the Mac Life Official. Now, the Mac Life Official itself is a pretty big publication in the world of mixed martial arts. The journalist himself is not extremely well known. His following on social medias is not like Ariel Helwani or anything even remotely close to that. But for some reason, probably due to some strange form of indirect nepotism, being that he works for Conor McGregor, has gotten spots at the press conferences and media scrums and things like this that I don't think he deserves. First of all, he's like the new first asker when it comes to the press conference and things like that, as long as John Morgan's not there, which, by the way, a lot of people, a lot of journalists, in fact, have said that John Morgan hustled his big ass off, okay, to get to events early so that he could get that first spot, and then eventually everybody just conceded it to him and they went, you know what, you get here way earlier than everybody else, have at her. Now, the finale of what I want to talk about is, it comes at the end of fight week. It's the post-fight press conference with Alexander Volkanovski, but I do want to set the stage a little bit and give some examples of poor journalism or poor behavior, or at the very least, showing maybe some selfishness, some narcissistic behavior and things like that on the side of Oscar Willis. Now, he works for Conor McGregor, as I said. He does a lot of those pub talks with Conor. He lobs him softball questions, which I get it, okay, because it's his boss and all that, but he also, which actually in my opinion makes this much more egregious, is friends with a lot of the guys from Australia, from New Zealand. I do believe he is from Australia. He was one of the first guys, actually not one of, pardon me, the first journalist post-UFC 293 at the press conference to bring up the fact that Israel Adesanya looked off in the cage after getting his ass schooled by Sean Strickland, okay? There's many examples of him doing things like this. When Sean Strickland came out for that post-fight press conference, he sounded unbelievably somber because he had just watched his friend get schooled for 5 rounds, but also made excuses for him when he was talking to the boss, which then allowed Dana White to expand upon that and create a whole host of excuses on behalf of Israel Adesanya, ones that he had not even made himself, by the way. Not just that, though. During this fight week, okay, he was the first question asker, whatever, I don't know the proper phrase for that. He was the first guy that got to ask a question at the pre-fight press conference, where, by the way, there are a ton of people, ton of reporters waiting to ask their questions, okay? That press conference is very limited in time. The entire video is 38 minutes. They didn't get on stage until about 2 minutes and 25 seconds into that video, and they stopped the video at about 30 minutes so that they could get the guys ready for the face-offs. Actually, I do believe it was 32 minutes, but so in overall, they had about half an hour to ask questions. Oscar Willis asked questions for 6 minutes. Okay, 6 minutes this motherfucker asked questions. That's what, a quarter of the time that is available to all reporters, to all journalists. By the time he was done, a lot of these journalists, it seemed as though, were coming up with questions on the spot, off the top of their head, just random bullshit. Eventually, one guy even asked Khamzat Chimaev who he was texting on his cell phone. That's how little questions they had left after Oscar Willis got done with everybody. And by the way, he wasn't a victim of long answers. He just continuously was asking answers. He did this at the post-fight press conference. Also, now, not just that, as I said, he's chummy with a lot of these fighters, which in my opinion makes this a lot worse. Now, Alexander Volkanovski, as we know, head kick KO'd by Islam Makhachev, beautiful head kick, brutal KO, do you know what I mean? And I'm going to give an example later on in the video that is almost a perfect one-to-one based on the situation, based on the knockout that happened, based on just what happened after the fact, okay? And then I'm going to give you the contrast. We'll compare and contrast the reactions, the emotions showed by the interviewer after that happened, the remorse that was shown after that happened, okay? So, Alexander Volkanovski, as I said, brutally KO'd, stunning head kick, perfectly placed, all that good stuff, fine. Now, he comes out for his post-fight press conference, which I was a little surprised by because most likely dude was pretty concussed, okay, but it is what it is. Obviously, he thought that he was fine enough to show up, and the doctors didn't stop him, so whatever. However, during this post-fight press conference, Alexander Volkanovski showed us emotions and acted in ways that we have never seen him even come close to acting before. And by the way, he's got a loss, you know what I mean, recently to Islam Makhachev. It wasn't like, I do feel like the knockout could have contributed to the emotions that were coming through. That oftentimes happens after you get a concussion and you are still obviously not all there. Now, he made a pretty stunning admission by my standards, which was that he has been dealing with some weird mental health problems that he did not want to go into too many details on clearly.
But I needed it. Again, obviously a lot of people will say it's for the money and all that, but it was much more than that. Like, you know what I mean? It is hard. Like, it really is hard for athletes. Sorry. I never thought I'd struggle with it, but I mean, like, for some reason, when I wasn't fighting or in camp, I just do my head in, you know.
It elicited a response from himself, just bringing it up. He tried his best to hold back his emotions. His lips were quivering. He had to stop and pause a couple of times. He was trying very hard to not break down in that moment, okay? Instead of Oscar Willis showing basic human emotions and not prying, poking, or prodding, especially considering Alexander Volkanovski was just knocked out. Do you know what I mean? If this was a one-on-one interview with him a week later, I would not be talking about it because it would be fair game at that point. It's fine. He's healed up. You know what I mean? It's one-on-one. We are in a room with a ton of different reporters, cameras, lights, all this shit. He had just been knocked out maybe at max half an hour before he's up there talking about it on a stage in front of all of these people, in front of all these journalists that want to ask him questions, in front of the cameras, the lights, all this shit. Instead of Oscar Willis using some basic social awareness and being like, you know what, I'm probably not going to fucking poke that a little too much, he asked 3 follow-up questions. By the way, taking more than half of Alexander Volkanovski's post-fight press conference time, which I thought was funny. Yet again, he did it, you know what I mean? At the pre-fight press conference, he did it, and then he did it here for Alexander Volkanovski. But it was pretty clear to me he was doing his best to elicit another response. Alexander Volkanovski was able to contain his emotions, continue on with the interview, and not break down emotionally. Oscar Willis, in my opinion, wanted that to happen, though, which is why he continued to do it. So at 1 minute and 45 seconds in the video, Alexander Volkanovski first divulges and tells us what he was willing to tell us about his emotional and mental health struggles or whatever. And then at 2:53, which was the second Alexander Volkanovski got done explaining it and said that he didn't want to use it to make excuses, all he wanted to do was clear up the I'm here for money bullshit, which I thought was bullshit from the get-go. As soon as Islam Makhachev mentioned that, I thought it was silly. If you're going to accuse somebody of fighting for money, then maybe you should offer up your pay-per-view buys to charity or some shit like that. But either way, we're not here to talk about that. Oscar Willis immediately asks a follow-up question.
I want to be sensitive to what you're saying, and you don't have to reveal anything you don't want to reveal, but you're saying something like Tyson Fury's spoken about in the past, that if I'm not fighting, I get dark places and I start getting down, or are you saying you get bored? What exactly do you mean by you need to stay busy before, or it does your head in?
Volkanovski was, at this point, looping. It seemed like he couldn't really string a good response together. He just kept going back to the same thing, like, He didn't want to make excuses. He was just trying to fucking get past these questions without divulging too much, probably because he's aware that he's emotional at this moment, and that often tends to be when you divulge a little bit too much information. He also was clearly uncomfortable. Like, I'm not understanding how the fuck this reporter that is friends with all of these guys, really good friends with Craig Jones, who is in Alexander Volkanovski's corner, good friends with Israel Adesanya, all these guys, yet he's poking and prodding a guy who, 1, was just knocked out, 2, divulged and offered up what information he was willing to offer up, and showed that he is having a very hard time containing his emotions. In my opinion, Oscar Willis wanted this man to cry. Now, he asks a second follow-up question the second Alexander Volkanovski is done with that answer.
I don't think you're the only athlete who struggled with that, by the way. You know,
And at this point, you can tell that Volk's kind of getting frustrated with it. He doesn't look all that happy. As I said, he's trying still to hold back his emotions, but he's not a dickhead. So he's not going to go and tell this reporter to fuck off. He's going to answer the questions as with as little detail as he possibly can, but it seemed like he was having a hard time coming up with the words to do that. Then we get a third follow-up question, which, to be fair, I'm not even going to include because it was actually more about the fight. He asked him, so to be clear, I understand your motive now. You want to fight in January. Volk told him that he wanted to fight in January, and then at 6:07, he tries to come back to it. The second Volk gets done answering that question, he tries to go back to it a third time.
And last one for me, but tell me to mind my own business if this is too much, but is this something you're still struggling with? Do you feel better now? Do you feel that now you've got a bit of activity, you can sort of push that to one side, or is this something you're going to have to be like, hey, I just need to have one more camp, I need to have one more fight, and then I can help?
After Volkanovski has clearly showed that he's uncomfortable, he's having troubles, he doesn't want to fucking divulge too much information, he doesn't want to give too many details because it's his personal business. He said what he thought was necessary. I'm not understanding this, man. It shows so little empathy. Like, by definition, sociopathic behavior. When you look at somebody rather than a human, but you look at them as an object that is here for your benefit. I'm going to get so many fucking views if I can get a good shot of him crying and we put that on the thumbnail. I'm going to get so many clicks. My interview will go viral. All this fucking shit is most likely going through his mind. Obviously, I can't tell you for sure, but I think that if he was actually in that moment trying to care for Alexander Volkanovski, trying to have a therapy session with him, then he's just the most autistic fucking reporter in the history of reporters because of the setting. Again, a one-on-one conversation, a little bit after the fact, no fucking problems. We're in a room with a bunch of reporters, some that would even be hostile to Alexander Volkanovski, some that would relish in the moment of watching him break down emotionally, right? And I mean that because of where we were at in the world. Yet he continues to ask them. And he's friends with these guys, man. If I saw my friend up there fucking crying, or trying not to, at the very best, after just getting knocked out, there's no way I'm poking and prodding at that subject. There's no way. I'll wait, dude. I'll talk to him later. Do you know what I mean? Why the fuck are you continuing to do this now? It just shows he's a weird creature, man. This guy's an insane creature. I believe he showed narcissistic personality traits, sociopathic personality traits, and look, there's a lot of journalists that do that, but the reason why this, in my opinion, is so much more egregious than what we've seen from other journalists, when you have Ariel Helwani trying to get Aljamain Sterling to essentially talk shit about his boss during fight week against Sean O'Malley, and Aljamain Sterling did not take the bait. Ariel Helwani tried to get him to take it multiple times. They're not good friends. It's just, they're using each other for each other's platforms. Ariel Helwani will use Aljamain Sterling to get views. Aljamain Sterling will use Ariel Helwani to get views. That's basically what it is. It's like a transaction. And Aljamain Sterling hadn't just been knocked out, dude. You know what I mean? It was during fight week. So he was, he had all his faculties there. He was able to not take the bait, probably because he realized, if I go and shit on my boss in fight week, after we've come to an agreement, after Dana White has done what he's done to make it right, that I had to do a quick turnaround, offered me more money, bought me the Lamborghini, shit like that, why would I go and shit on that relationship when I'm the one that has to deal with Dana White? Ariel, you fucking don't, right? It's a little different. Again, you're friends with this guy. He just got knocked out. It's fucking wild to me. And it shows just no empathy whatsoever. And there's going to be people that will defend this by saying, well, look, he's a journalist. What do you want? Like, he's trying to get whatever, trying to get information out of him. And I get that. But what I don't get is, in my opinion, I believe that unless you're going to label yourself a propagandist, you should just try to do objective journalism. Talk about the fight. Do you know what I mean? Oftentimes, the problem I have with Ariel Helwani, the problem I have with all these guys, if they were to say flat out, I'm a propagandist, I'm anti-UFC, instead of trying to pretend that they're not, or, you know, in other people's case, it might not be that they're anti-UFC, but they're anti-certain fighters, they're anti-certain whatever. If they just made it known to the public, there would be no problems. But the fact that they report and then, you know, show their videos to hundreds of thousands of people that believe that they're actual journalists, that, in my opinion, is the problem. When you are a journalist who is not a fucking therapist, by the way, you should not be going at Volkanovski, trying to get him to break down after he just got knocked out. And again, I'm going to give you guys an example of when this happened with a different set of people, and it wasn't even a journalist, and how badly that person felt after the fact. Now, as I said, I believe that Oscar Willis sees people more as a commodity than other people, which is crazy considering he's supposed to be friends with Alexander Volkanovski. It was extremely frustrating to watch. I could tell from a screen that Volkanovski was not doing okay. And, you know, there are many reasons for that. But whatever you think the reason may be, the fact of the matter is he wasn't doing okay. And this guy was trying to get him to cry on camera for views after Alexander Volkanovski did what a strong man does, showed some emotion, and then ate that shit. You know what I mean? He didn't fucking break down. He's not up there crying and bawling his eyes out. He divulged what he was willing to, and then he swallowed the rest. And this guy was trying to get him to throw it the fuck back up, and it drives me crazy, okay? At the end of the one question, he says, I don't really want to touch on it, sorry.
I don't really want to touch on it, sorry.
Yeah.
After he said that's just too many details. Again, he's being the most polite he can possibly be. I reckon in that moment he wanted to tell that guy to fuck off. Well, like that's what I think a lot of fighters. What is this, a fucking therapy session? Fuck you, pal. You know what I mean? This guy has this weird thing about him where he's taken a single amateur fight and he won it. Okay, to be fair. Now, it was a back and forth brawl, which, whatever, dude, good on him, okay? But he has this weird thing about him where he thinks he now understands the emotions that a fighter goes through. He now thinks he understands the highs and lows, all this shit, because he's had one amateur fight. They're nowhere near comparable, my guy. Imagine what you felt, but you don't know because you never lost. You never put yourself in a situation where you could actually, something was at stake, whereas Alexander Volkanovski did, okay? But you can tell at that moment when he finally shuts it down. You know, he's fighting back tears. His lips are twisting. He's trying to fucking hold it back, shivering a little bit. His eyes are watery at the least glazed. They're red. It's just frustrating, man. Selfish and narcissistic. He didn't see Volkanovski as a fighter in that moment. Now, the example that I want to give to you, which is almost a perfect 1-to-1, because this finish, I don't know if it went down as a TKO or what, I can't remember off the top of my head, was brutal. A perfectly placed head kick. Volk wobbled hard. Islam got on top of him, and vicious ground and pound. Like, the kick opened up one cut, right? On the right eyebrow of Volkanovski. When he got up after Islam was finished with him, he had another nasty cut on his left eye. He had he had a fucking huge scrape under his chin. It was a brutal finish, okay? Daniel Cormier, when he fought John Jones the second time, and John Jones head kicked him, and then finished it off with brutal ground and pound, right? Now, there's not as much time in between when Oscar Willis got the chance to talk to Alexander Volkanovski. It happened almost immediately, but it's just the reaction from the guy that did it. Now, Joe Rogan spoke to him, Daniel Cormier, that is, after he had just been brutally finished. And Daniel Cormier could not hold his emotions in. Now, maybe had it been 30 minutes, he would have been able to do what Volkanovski did and choke back those tears, but he couldn't. So he cried on camera. He said, whatever, all the shit he said, you know, he was upset, clearly. Joe Rogan beat himself up about that for... I know there's a lot of people that don't like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan beat himself up about that for fucking years. Years. He'll still talk about it. If you ask him about that, he'll say he regrets it. He was so upset with himself that he put Daniel Cormier in that position, that it went the way that it went, then the memes that followed, then all of that shit. He felt horrible about it, and he expressed regret for it, and for a little while there, now he eventually ended up going back on it because it is what it is, but he told the UFC, I will not interview fighters who have just been knocked out like that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's the correct human response to have. Everybody makes mistakes, man. So his mistake was interviewing a fighter who had just been knocked out that moment in the cage. But the fact that he showed remorse, he beat himself up about it for a very long time. And I'm not saying Willis has to do that here, but I'm just saying, like, buddy, have some fucking human decency. Have some social awareness. Don't be so fucking selfish. It's just insane to me. But that's the response from somebody who actually cares about the person that he's interviewing. Whereas, in my opinion, Oscar Willis, as I said, more or less sees a commodity in Alexander Volkanovski. Doesn't really care how uncomfortable he was making him feel in that moment. All he cares about is the clicks he's going to get, the virality of his video, if he can get a fucking thumbnail of Volk crying, breaking down on his video for later. And yeah, that's about all the gripes I have with him. Now, he's done a lot of other weird shit. This guy's a very strange individual. As I said, he's a fucking creature. He's a gremlin. He looks like one too. Don't feed him past midnight. Who knows what'll happen. But, man, as I said, indirect nepotism, you know what I mean? Getting all these fucking opportunities that he does not deserve. Calls himself a journalist, but in my opinion is more or less a propagandist. And again, if they would just flat out say they were, I wouldn't have a fucking problem with it. Softball questions for certain guys, visibly upset having to interview other guys. Just not a good journalist. And again, he's not going to get me as many views as maybe a guy like Ariel Helwani did, but I don't fucking care. I want it to be called out. Mac Life is a publication that is big in mixed martial arts, as I said, and for some reason this guy's getting a lot of opportunities, and I don't really think that he deserves them. And I think that he's a shitbag for what he did to Alexander Volkanovski. And by the way, I'll just say this also before I end. Obviously, I am a fan of Alexander Volkanovski. I've said this throughout the week, throughout fight week, that I'm a fan of his. It's, you know what I mean? It is what it is. I would be calling this out for any fighter, though, because I don't think that this is fair. You know what I mean? I called it out when Ariel Helwani was trying to get Aljamain Sterling to shit-talk his boss during fight week, and I'm not an Aljamain Sterling fan. If this was somebody else who I wasn't particularly a fan of, I would still call it out, because I think it's bad fucking behavior, dude. You know what I mean? Oscar Willis needs a timeout, bro. Either way, like and subscribe. Keep an eye out when you see this gremlin interviewing people, because I think that he's unbelievably biased. And as I said, this is just a problem I have with him here. He didn't really get to show a whole lot of bias during this fight week, but as I said, UFC 293, he sure as shit did. And every time he interviews Conor McGregor, he sure as shit did. But either way, man, it's just, yeah, I don't like the guy. Call it out when you see it. Bad journalism, bad interviewing, and hope he realizes that. Because I don't know if he wasn't friends with the fighter, if he would have felt comfortable to do that. But again, that makes me, it's more egregious because you're putting your friend in that uncomfortable situation, not just any other person. So either way, dude, like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.